You are walking down the street and you see a brand new iPhone sitting on a park bench. Your first instinct is probably that catchy little phrase we all learned in kindergarten: finders keepers, losers weepers. It seems like a universal rule of life. If someone is careless enough to lose it, then you're lucky enough to keep it. But what if I told you that following that childhood rhyme could actually land you in handcuffs? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Sarah, and today we're talking about innocent things regular Americans do every day. Things that feel totally legal, but are actually crimes. We're not talking about obvious stuff like robbing banks. We're talking about mistakes that honest people make because they just don't know the law. And ignorance of the law is almost never a valid defense. Let me tell you about a guy named Bob. Bob is a good guy with a clean record who works a steady job. One Saturday morning, Bob is walking through the parking lot of his local grocery store. He looks down and spots a thick leather wallet lying right next to a shopping cart. Bob picks it up and looks around. No one is looking for it. The parking lot is mostly empty. Bob opens the wallet and sees $500 in cash. He thinks it's his lucky day. He takes the cash out and puts it in his pocket. Then he tosses the empty wallet into a nearby trash can, thinking he's just getting rid of the clutter. Bob goes home and buys his family a nice dinner with that money. He goes to sleep feeling great. 2 days later, police knock on Bob's door. They have surveillance video from the grocery store showing Bob picking up the wallet. They charge Bob with theft of lost property. Bob is shocked. He tells the officers he found it, so it belongs to him. But here's the hard legal truth. In almost every state in the U.S., finding lost property does not automatically make it yours. The law calls this theft by finding or larceny by finding. If the property has an identifiable owner and you make no reasonable effort to return it, you are stealing. The wallet contained an ID. Because Bob took the cash and discarded the ID, he demonstrated intent to deprive the owner of their property. That's a crime. Even if there was no ID, finding something of significant value usually requires you to turn it in to the police. If no one claims it after a set period, usually 30 to 90 days, then you might get to keep it legally. But simply pocketing it is theft. Now, let's look at another situation that happens all the time. Let me introduce you to Sarah. Sarah is a college student living in an apartment complex. She just moved in and her internet hasn't been set up yet. She opens her laptop and sees a Wi-Fi network named Linksys that's completely unlocked, no password required. She figures if they didn't put a password on it, they must not mind if people use it, or maybe it's a public hotspot. So she connects to check her email and stream a few movies. Sarah thinks she's just being resourceful. But technically, Sarah might be committing a crime. This falls under laws regarding unauthorized access to a computer network. In many states, and even under federal statutes like the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, accessing a network you don't have permission to use is illegal. It doesn't matter that the door was unlocked. If you walk into a stranger's house just because the front door was open, you're still trespassing. The digital world works the same way. Now, will the FBI raid Sarah's house for checking her email on a neighbor's Wi-Fi? Probably not. But if she uses that bandwidth to do something illegal, or if the neighbor notices a slowdown and tracks the access, she could face fines or charges. It's a risk that simply isn't worth taking. Let's move on to something that feels like winning the lottery. Let me tell you about Dave. Dave wakes up one morning and checks his bank account app on his phone. He usually has about $2,000 in there, but today the balance shows $22,000. Dave's heart skips a beat. He stares at the screen. He didn't win a contest. He didn't inherit money. It's clearly a bank error. But Dave thinks possession is 9/10 of the law. The money's in his account, so the bank must have given it to him. Dave immediately transfers the money to a different savings account and withdraws $5,000 in cash to buy a used motorcycle. He figures if the bank made a mistake, that's their problem, not his. Wrong. Dead wrong. When the bank realizes the error, and they always realize the error, they'll reverse the transaction. But since Dave already spent it, his account goes into the negative. Dave ignores the bank's calls to pay it back. Soon, the police are involved. Dave is charged with theft or larceny. Here's the legal rule. Just because money is deposited into your account by mistake does not mean ownership has transferred to you. You have a legal obligation to return funds that are not yours. Spending money you know doesn't belong to you is a crime. It's legally the same as finding a bag of cash inside the bank teller's booth and walking out with it. Dave is now facing a felony charge because the amount was over a certain statutory limit, all because he thought a computer glitch was a gift. Now let's talk about personal safety. This one gets a lot of people in trouble, especially when they travel. Let me tell you about Mike. Mike is a responsible father who lives in Arizona. He legally owns a firearm and carries a pocket knife for work. He also keeps a canister of pepper spray in his glove box for self-defense. Mike decides to take a road trip with his family to the East Coast. He drives through several states. He assumes that since these items are legal in his home state, he's fine to have in his car as long as he doesn't use them. Mike gets pulled over for a broken taillight in New Jersey, or maybe New York. The officer asks if there are any weapons in the vehicle. Mike, being honest, says yes and points to his collection. Mike is immediately arrested. Why? Because laws regarding weapons vary wildly from state to state. What is a legal pocket knife in Arizona might be considered an illegal gravity knife or switchblade in another state. Pepper spray rules are tricky. Some states ban canisters that hold more than a specific amount of fluid. Other states require a firearms ID card just to possess pepper spray. And regarding the firearm, even if Mike has a permit in Arizona, that permit is not valid everywhere. Unless there's reciprocity between the states, Mike is committing a felony possession of a weapon just by crossing the state line. This happens to good people all the time. They think the Second Amendment covers them everywhere automatically, but state regulations on transport and possession are strict. Ignorance of the specific state statute where you're driving is not a defense. Let's look at one final scenario involving the police. Let me tell you about Jenny. Jenny sees a police officer arresting a man on the sidewalk. She thinks the officer is being too rough. She pulls out her phone and starts recording. Now, recording the police in a public space is generally a First Amendment right. Most people know this. But Jenny gets emotional. She steps closer to get a better angle. She starts shouting at the officer, telling him to stop. She gets within 2 feet of the struggle, yelling questions. The officer tells her to back up. She refuses, saying she has a right to be there. Suddenly, Jenny is arrested too. She's charged with obstruction of justice or interfering with a police officer. Here's the nuance that people miss. You have a right to record. You do not have a right to interfere. If your physical presence makes it harder for the officer to do his job, you're breaking the law. If you're standing close enough that the officer has to worry about you grabbing his weapon or being a threat, you're too close. Courts have upheld that officers can order you to stand back a reasonable distance. Usually 10 feet or more is considered a safe buffer. Jenny's mistake was not the recording, it was the proximity and the interference. So how do you protect yourself from these innocent mistakes? Here are the practical takeaways you need to remember. If you find lost property of value, turn it into the police and get a receipt. Never use Wi-Fi that you don't have explicit permission to use. If money appears in your bank account, don't touch it and call the bank immediately. Check the weapon laws of every single state you plan to drive through before you leave your driveway. Film the police from a safe distance and never physically interject yourself into a scene. Staying out of jail often comes down to common sense and curbing that impulse to get something for nothing. The law is not always intuitive, it's rigid. If you found this information helpful, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I post videos every week breaking down the law so you can protect yourself and your family. Knowledge is your best defense. Stay safe and stay legal. I'll see you in the next video.